first of all, looking at what a microaggression is, right? So it's those like indirect, subtle, unintentional things that we may say or do.
When people say you're very articulate or you speak very well,
you're so exotic.
Or you don't have an accent. So exotic.
Oh,
I've gotten, you don't have to tan. You never have to tan. You never have to worry about your skin color, right? You don't have to worry about the winter time.
So, the intent was not to be mean, right? The intent was not to hurt that individual in any way. But what sometimes happens is that there's an impact, right? It impacts that individual in a specific way. So I think that when you're faced with those types of situations, if the individual clearly is not comfortable with it, or they vocalize the fact that, hey, like, that was not appropriate, I've been impacted by what you just did, or that hurt me, part of your role is to turn around and say, okay, I hear what you're saying. I think oftentimes our inner egos want to defend ourselves. We get very defensive in those moments, and we're like, oh, well, that's not what I meant. Like, I just think your hair is pretty. But because it impacted that person, we have to now turn around and recognize that impact.
Right? I can definitely speak of my own experience in terms of like what has occurred and what is still continuing to occur. And we do have to remember that I am not speaking for all Black women everywhere. And when we're talking about specific situations, it's not one paintbrush. This is Jones's experience. It's now everyone's experience. And I think that goes the same with with microaggressions. So what you may say or do to one person, depending on the day, the time, it could be taken in as positive, and it can be a source of education and a source of communication. And at other times, it can be taken in as negative, because maybe at that point in time, they may have been exhausted and they've had too much. So with microaggressions, it builds up into something that is not a positive feeling within that person who is experiencing microaggressions. And it also depends on where this is coming from. So if we're going to talk about hair, I've had people touch my hair. So sometimes willingly, sometimes unwillingly. So one time I was in Costa Rica and I had braids all the way down to my butt, and they were heavy. And we were on a trip to go horseback riding. I was with my one friend who is Korean, and I fell asleep. And there was a group of children, 4 kids from the US, white. And as I slept, I woke up and my friend told me that, Joanne, as you were sleeping, they were touching your hair. So when I woke up and she told me this, I turned around and one of the kids started to ask about it. And at that point in time, I was like, okay, let's just talk about this. Let's talk about like hair and how it feels and etc. and like why it's different, and that's it. And that was a great educational opportunity. At the same time, I have been to different countries where I am there for entertainment, and I'm not for that. In Thailand, we are in beautiful places and settings, and you can take pictures of gold statues, like literal gold statues. But I will find a group of people posing next to me to take a picture of me and my hair. And that is not, it's like, it's funny, but at the same time, it really isn't. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where like, if you are angry about it, then you do come across as that angry Black woman, and you don't want to be that. So then after a while, you almost have to like politely talk about certain things. But in a way, you also have to kind of like bury your actual raw emotions in order to make people feel better about what they're trying to do. And that in itself is exhausting. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about microaggressions, it's the little things that add up over time. And it could be seen as very small, but you don't know how small it is to that person. Is it the straw that broke that person's back? Mm-hmm. Was it that thing that you said at the very end of the day?
Now that a lot of these concepts have become, we're being more vocal about them and we're bringing them up, I think that's really important to also make an environment that's open and non-judgmental for somebody as an example, a Black woman to actually tell you how that makes her feel, right? Because again, going back to us being in Canada specifically, where things are a little bit more hush-hush, we don't know. A lot of Black women, a lot of us as women of color too, have just sort of grown up in an environment where that's just how it is. So you just sort of learn to be polite back, right? And not really open up about, this actually does bother me and this is why. But now that there's a little bit more dialogue around it, you know, we as people have to also make sure that we're allowing that safe space and coming from a place of compassion, as Crystal said, to actually even open up that conversation with somebody who might want to share and let them actually speak their piece for maybe the first time in a long time about particular subjects that are sensitive.